So the meeting tonight, we're so excited to have Linda Akutagawa from who is a commissioner. I'll do her full introduction in a minute, and also a friend, Karen Lawson, who is an activist, grassroots activist, and kind of a trainer of activists who will be speaking on the second half of tonight. So the commissioner is going to tell us what the process is, and then Karen will teach us how we can get involved in kind of the advocacy level and what we can do hands-on on deck to have a say in making sure that those lines are drawn as fairly as possible, and maybe towards our interests, if there are going to be interests, that our interests are protected. We will not have our typical business tonight, so there will be no reports from the working action groups. If there are any specific updates, I will send those out on Tuesday in our weekly update email. If you are interested in joining any of the working action groups, if you go to our website, wave4all.org, you can go to subscribe, and you'll have a list of our working action groups, and you can sign up there, and then you will receive those email newsletters go out more frequently than our kind of updates about them. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the commissioner. Linda is president and CEO of LEAP, which is Leadership Education for Asian Pacifics. She's passionate. She's a passionate social entrepreneur and a beneficiary of LEAP's leadership programming. She's a believer in the value and urgent need for diverse, equitable, and inclusive leadership. Through LEAP, she's dedicated herself to continuing the cycle of leadership development and inspiring Asian and Pacific Islanders to step up to leadership roles across sectors, industries, and communities. Ms. Akutagawa, I'm going to get this, Linda. Akutagawa is the chair of the Alliance of Board of Diversity and an appointed member of the California Department of Insurance Diversity Task Force. She is a member of the Asian and Asian American Institute Advisory Board on the Cal State LA, as well as a board member of Asian Pacific Planning and Policy Council. She's a nationally recognized speaker and facilitator on leadership, diversity, inclusion, and equity, nonprofits, and board governance. She received her BS in international business with a minor in economics from Cal State LA. She has a certificate in nonprofit board consulting through BoardSource. And she is a married and a fur mom to a cockapoo, an auntie to 11 nieces and nephews. And she is a registered no party preference. And I'll let her tell you why that's important. And without further ado, Commissioner Akutagawa.
All right, thank you. And just from a time check perspective, can you tell me about how much time I have for this? I could do the very quick, and I could do like the full on, roughly about 35 minutes version.
Yeah, I think what we were thinking was somewhere in the 25 to 30-minute version, and then leaving some time for questions afterwards. So
okay.
if it's 25 minutes of the presentation and then 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A, so the whole enchilada, maybe 35 to 40 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, thank you, Joanna, for that introduction. I do have to confess, I always cringe when everybody reads off the entirety of my bio. It's like, it's one of those things that I have to do, but I thought, okay, let's just get to the meat of where we're really, the reasons why we're here. But I do appreciate, the warm welcome, and I appreciate that, like I said, being invited to be able to present to all of you. I'm one of the 14 commissioners on the 2020 California Citizens Redistricting Commission, and I'm a proudly serving member of this commission. And I also I'll just tell you a little bit about why I'm on this commission and how I got to be on it. So part of it, and I'll just start by saying that I did it because I felt like I wanted to do something that would be a little bit bigger than what I was doing, and would enable me to give back to the community, and in this particular case, really, the people of California. I also felt that if we want to see a commission that is representative of Californians, that also means we have to be able to have, applicants that are going to be representative of California as well too. And so, hence, my application. And so I will say that I did not really think that I would eventually make it this far, but being on this commission, it's been really a great experience, and I really appreciate and respect my fellow commissioners. So what I want to just talk about a little bit here is what I'll be covering during this Redistricting Basics Commission. And the reason why we're doing this is is really because I think redistricting, as Joanna and I were kind of briefly talking earlier, this isn't something that's always something that's well known. And part of this is, this is only the second time that we, the people of California, have been able to participate in a meaningful way in redistricting. Prior to 2010, it was really done by the politicians, or if the politicians weren't able to get it done, then by the courts. And so we now have a direct say in being able to influence how redistricting is done. And through this redistricting basics presentation, what I'll do is I'm going to talk about who and what the commission does, and how you can get involved in this process. So let me just go ahead and get started. As part of this, I do want to just give a friendly reminder that our California Government Code section 8253(3) strictly forbids commissioners and staff from taking any public input outside of a regularly scheduled commission meeting or official public input meeting. So if you wanted to, during the Q&A, give me input about what the line should be, I cannot take that, but I do want to encourage you that we do want to hear from you, and that I will, say to you that you can submit any kind of comment through our website, and or multiple other ways, phone and through our communities of interest tool, by snail mail. I'll talk about all of those more specifically a little bit later in the presentation, but I do want to just say this before I start. So let me start by just talking about what is redistricting. And so as we had just said, it's been hard to make redistricting sexy, but we're trying to make it sexy because we want people to be interested in redistricting, even though it's a little bit challenging. But redistricting is defined as drawing new boundaries that determine which Californians are represented by each electoral district. So you see the picture there, we just went through the census. We're now going through the process of redistricting, which then eventually leads to the, to our representation. So then why do we redraw district maps? Because, hey, we all know change happens and communities change, people are born, people die, people move. They move in the state, they move outside of the state, they move from one community to another community. So therefore, communities can grow and communities can shrink in size. So areas that were at one point, roughly the same number of people can become unequal. And so it's for that reason that we have to redraw the lines of, the districts. And so what we're doing is just really updating the district lines as a result. So your voice, your choice. I will say that for the person who was asking about a hashtag, you could make that a hashtag. One of the greatest powers that the people of California has is to elect our own representatives to conduct the business of our government. So how district boundaries are configured can make the difference between empowering and maximizing our voices as voters, or minimizing and muting our voices as voters. So in most other states, politicians are the ones that redraw district lines, and often redraw lines or district lines that create safe districts for them so that they can stay in office. And of course, we know that redistricting has been used at times to exclude communities from political power. And so for us, by fully participating in and monitoring the upcoming redistricting process, more communities will have an opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. So this is why we're doing these redistricting basics, so that you can understand not only the stakes, but also how can you get involved, because speaking up about your community is critical to helping to keep your community one as whole as possible, so that it's in one district, and so the needs and the interests of your communities are met. And then this also ensures that your voice is going to be heard by elected leaders who are going to be making decisions about the quality of issues that are near and dear to us, and that also impact decisions around the allocation of financial resources. And so, our voice and making our voice heard in this context is going to be really, really important. And so we want to hear from you. We want your input in shaping, helping us to shape these new electoral district lines. So how does redistricting affect you? So we've thought of 4 different ways in which redistricting can directly affect you. So one, power to the people. Redistricting, it transfers the power of um, of, of, of drawing the electoral lines from politicians to us. So it was the Voters First Act that really was an historic act, and it really enabled us to have power to really have a say in who is going to be representing us. Secondly, it enables us to really have a voice in who's going to be the champion for our issues. So having that opportunity to elect representatives that champion our issues is going to be really important in a state like California, which is very large, but it's also very diverse. Um, so the issues can vary. So in places like Northern California, they're going to be probably looking for people who are going to champion issues like environmental and economic issues versus, Central California, they're going to be looking for someone who's going to champion issues like water and agricultural issues. And then here in Southern California, we're going to be looking for people who are going to be champions, around issues dealing with transportation, housing, immigration, employment. So it's going to vary from across the state. Another way in which redistricting, is going to likely affect you is funding. So, tied to the issue of electing representatives that champion our issue are also having elected officials or representatives that have our financial interests at heart. So when it comes time to building a budget, we're going to want someone in office that's going to fight to ensure that our communities get the financial resources that it deserves and that it needs for the kind of services, that our communities need, whether it's around education or if it's water or fire protection, housing, all different kinds of things that are going to be important and are really going to be of interest to us. And the last area in which we believe redistricting can affect us is community boundaries. So the redistricting process is all about drawing lines and determining which communities get grouped into which districts. So your input in this process is essential to helping us, the commissioners, understand where your community starts and where it ends. And the more input we get, the more nuance we'll have in understanding where do we draw those lines? Where do we, where can it make the difference between one street over to another street? And I just want to say this, redistricting in California is one of the few civic activities that any Californian can take part in and provide input to us regarding their community. And it ultimately, this input and then therefore the lines that we draw will ultimately impact the laws, the regulations, the tax structures, how funding is distributed, even which services are provided based on, who's going to be representing you. And so, I've said this to many people, if you have young children, especially if you have seniors in high school, this is an opportunity for them to get their feet wet in civic engagement because, you can imagine redistricting is going to really affect the next 10 years of all of our lives once the electoral lines are drawn. And so for, your high school age kids, this is going to impact them into adulthood as well, too. So the road to fair representation. The U.S. Constitution requires that every American receive as close to equal representation as possible in government. And as populations of the districts change over time, what it can do is it can leave some people overrepresented and other people underrepresented. So for example, as a district's the population in a district grows, you have an elected official that's going to have to represent that many more people. And then, therefore, for each person, in a sense, you're underrepresented because you have the elected official that has to meet the needs of more people. Versus if you're in an area where you have less people because of population changes, that elected official is then representing basically less people, and each person is overrepresented because they don't have to be as accountable to as many people. And so I think what redistricting is going to do is to ensure that evening out of the population so that we do have equal representation. So after the federal government publishes the census data, which we're expecting to have it be in mid-August sometime, California is going to redraw the boundaries of the California Congress, the California State Senate, the California State Assembly, and the Board of Equalization, so that the districts will correctly reflect the latest count of the state's population. Redistricting is based on the idea that our voices should be represented fairly by creating districts that have the same number of people. So census results are used to draw the new maps every 10 years to account for ways in which populations have changed and have moved across states and districts. So at the federal level, we do know that we just took part in reapportionment. And what it did is it reallocated the House seats amongst the states. This too is done after the census. And so that in the case of California, we now have 52 House seats, which is down one seat from the previous number of 53. Which is, I guess I'll say it's a little bit better than was expected. I mean, we were expected to possibly lose up to 2 House seats. We only lost 1. So in the past, historically, it's the elected officials or the legislatures that have drawn the maps that have allowed them to choose their constituents rather than enabling constituents to choose their representatives. So this former system undermined the concept of fair representation, which is to now give people the power to choose their representatives. So why does independent, and that word is important, independent. Why does independent redistricting matter? We talked about how redistricting can affect you. Let me tell you about why independent redistricting matters. So we know that democracy depends on voters having the opportunity to choose their representatives. So when elected officials redraw the lines of their own districts, they get to design their territory and who their voters are. So what you'll see here is 4 different ways in which 50 people can be divided into different districts. So, and hopefully it'll give you an idea of why it's important to delegate the power of redistricting to the people. So gerrymandering happens when election district boundaries are drawn in a way that gives a particular set of people, like a political party or a racial group, an unfair political advantage over another. So what you'll see with the images here is that, let's just say we have a district or a jurisdiction that has 50 people in it. Now, of those 50 people, 60% of those people are orange people and 40% of those people are purple people. So we could draw 5 different districts in multiple ways, but it's not always going to be fair. The first 2 examples show ways in which to draw district lines in a fair manner, where the districts are drawn to reflect the population proportionally. And then 2 of the examples on the right-hand side show ways in which district lines can be drawn in a manner that does not reflect the population fairly, which is referred to as gerrymandering. And so this is why independent commissions like California's commission were created, to remove politics from the process and focus on the needs of the people. So I just want to talk a little bit about the criteria by which the commissioners have to then keep in mind as we redraw these electoral lines. So number 1, and this is and these are weighted criteria. So the very first and most basic set of criteria that we have to follow is that each district must be of equal or near equal size to comply with the U.S. Constitution. The second criteria that we have to follow is the Voting Rights Act. So districts must comply with the Voting Rights Act to ensure that minorities have a fair opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. Number three, number three, districts must be drawn contiguously so that all parts of the district are connected with each other. So in other words, so I live in Huntington Beach, as you could see from my background here. I live in Huntington Beach, and what it means is, like, for example, if let's say a district, if the commission decides, okay, we want to draw a district that includes Huntington Beach, we're going to skip over Fountain Valley and Westminster and Costa Mesa, and we're gonna take part of Irvine and put it in a district with Huntington Beach. That is not allowable because it's not contiguous. It's not connected together. It doesn't connect together. So that would be, not allowable. So they must all connect together. So number four, districts must minimize, so this is in terms of communities of interest, districts must minimize the division of cities, counties, neighborhoods, and communities as much as possible, to the extent that we can. So in other words, it's not in the best interest of whether it's a city or a county or even a neighborhood or a community of interest if it's split up into multiple districts. So as much as possible, we have to keep in mind, ways in which we could keep, communities of interest intact as much as we can. Sometimes I know that based on looking at previous district maps, that's not always possible, but as much as possible, we need to do that as much as we can. And again, it goes back to understanding the communities of interest and really hearing from all of you about the nuances about your communities of interest. We can look at maps and other things like that, and that helps us to understand some of the bigger stuff, but we don't know the nuance. And that's where your input becomes important to understand communities of interest. Number five, districts as much as possible must be or should be geographically compact so that such that nearby areas of population are not bypassed for more distant populations. So this refers to density, not shape. So in other words, for an elected official, it's not great if one end of the person's district to the other end of the district may be 3 hours apart. That's not what you would call geographically compact. As much as possible, we're required to try to keep the size of the district as compact as possible so that it does ensure, the ability for a representative to get from one place to the other and be able to adequately represent the people that the person is elected to represent. And lastly, nesting. So where practicable, each Senate district should be comprised of 2 complete and adjacent assembly districts. Board of Equalization districts should be comprised of 10 complete and adjacent state Senate districts. So lastly, I want to just say this, and this is important. The place of residence of any incumbent or political candidate may not be considered in the creation of a map, and districts may not be drawn for the purposes of favoring or discriminating against an incumbent, a political candidate, or political party. So let me just say, I'm just going to comment real quick on this. There are lots of different redistricting efforts that are going on. The state is just one of many. The commission is redrawing. Like I said, the districts for state offices, state Senate, Assembly, and Board of Equalization, as well as Congress. But at the city and county level, there are independent redistricting commissions going on, as well as not independent redistricting efforts. The politicians, the elected politicians. I know, like, for example, here in Orange County, the Orange County Board of Supervisors are doing redistricting based on their own, supervisorial districts. So, this is also something that I would encourage all of you to really keep an eye on as well, too. I want to tell you a little bit about, excuse me, the history of how we got to where we are with an independent redistricting commission. So, I mentioned this earlier. Prior to 2010, it was redistricting was drawn by politicians or judges if the legislature did not do their job correctly. So in 2008, California voters passed Proposition 11, the Voters First Act, which authorized the creation of the first independent commission to draw new district lines for the state Senate, state state assembly, excuse me, and the Board of Equalization. In 2010, Proposition 20 was passed, which was called the Voters First Act for Congress. And what it did is it added the responsibility of also drawing congressional lines to the work of the independent commission. And so our goal of the commission is to spread the word that the people's role did not end with being counted in the census, and that what we are looking for you to help us do is to get your input, on your communities so that it can help us draw better new lines for the new electoral districts. As I said, this was this is something that I think sometimes we don't always realize this. I think intellectually we know, but I just want to repeat it again. The 2020 commission is only the second time. So that means that this is only the second time that all of us as the people of California are participating, have an active role participating in the redistricting process. So that's why I think, efforts like this, these, what we're doing tonight is so important, because the more we can get the word out that we want all of you to participate in this process, the more I believe we can draw better, more fair maps so that then it does really represent what we, the people of California, want and expect in our elected officials. Now, I do want to say that we are not the only state that has an independent commission. There are a number of other states that also use independent commissions, and others that are also looking at it as well too. In terms of our selection, as I said at the beginning, I never expected to have been selected, but I do want to just stress that in terms of the makeup of the commission, we are a commission that is 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 4 no party preference. And we went through a really rigorous process. And so, as I said, I'm just really both honored and proud to be a part of this commission. I do want to share with you and introduce you to my fellow commissioners. We are 8 women, I'm proud to say that, and 6 men. We're from Northern, Central, and Southern California. We are from the coast to the mountains, suburban and rural. We are all different age ranges from 30s to 60s. We have different kinds of professional experiences to different other kinds of identities. So I really truly am proud that I do feel that we are as best as we can. I think we are as reflective and as representative of the diversity of California. And I just want to also encourage you, if you're curious about seeing us in action, log on to one of our meetings. You could see the live streams of our meetings by going to our website, redrawthelineca.org, and you could see how we're working. I really do believe that these are the 14 of us. We respect and we listen to each other, and we really do, I think, enjoy working with each other, and we really do respect and value and want to hear from all of you as well too in terms of the business of the commission. There's 2 key duties that I believe that we, the commissioners, have. So one is education, so doing this and doing outreach so that we can get as many people from within California participating in this process. And secondly, it's drawing the maps. So we'll be drawing maps for 52 congressional districts, 40 state Senate districts, 80 state assembly districts, and 4 Board of Equalization districts. And what I'm showing you here is you'll see that there's a kind of a, using Sacramento, there's the Sacramento districts as just an example. I also want to mention to you that we've been we realized that California is very, very large, and what we did is we intentionally broke up California into outreach zones so that then each of the different regions of California will have a commissioner that they can at least contact if they have questions, they want to turn to us to come and do, one of these redistricting basics presentations, or anything in which we can help facilitate, more people participating in the process of redistricting by giving us input about their communities of interest. So I've talked a lot about communities of interest. So let me tell you, what that means. So when we're drawing maps, we have to be mindful of communities of interest. And I said this maybe earlier. I said, we can get information about your city and county level information, but what we need is the nuance, and the nuance of our maps are going to come from the input that we get from all of the people, who are in California, who are going to tell us about your communities of interest. So communities of interest are defined as concentrated populations which share common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for the purposes of effective and fair representation. So examples include areas in which people share similar living standards, similar cultures, use the same transportation facilities, have similar work opportunities, or have access to the same media. People can belong to multiple communities of interest, so where we live, where we work, where we play. So keep in mind that a community of interest is not the same as a district, but what it is, it's the building blocks of the districts. So I'll give you an example. In Orange County, for example, there's the Great Park. That's an example. We wouldn't want that to be carved up into like 2 different districts, or even like a university like UC Irvine, or perhaps like Cal State Fullerton. Another example that I give is, like where the stadiums are, Honda Center and Angel Stadium. Some people, and the businesses in particular, if you think about, where you work, you may think that, hey, the area around the stadiums are a community of interest because they should be represented by one elected official so that they can keep in mind the needs of both stadiums. So that's just a quick example of what a community of interest could be. So how do you define and tell us about your community of interest? So you could do so in a couple different ways. One, you could tell us verbally. You could call in and leave us a voicemail on. Literally, you could leave us a voicemail at the commission office, or you can take part in what is going to be a number of public input meetings that we'll be scheduling starting June 10th through at least early September. And so, your stories about your communities of interest is going to be important, and they're going to be powerful. You could share examples of what your community has in common, or you could say, you could say, hey, just imagine that you're a tourist in your city. What are the things that you would want visitors or tourists to know about your community? Does your community share certain kinds of things in common, or are there important places where your community gathers, or is there a history behind your community that should be told to us? This is going to be really important. The other way that you could tell us about your community of interest is to write to us. And, I think that some people, feel more comfortable telling their story in writing because maybe you're much more eloquent in writing. And so you can write to us, send us a letter by U.S. Postal Service. You could send us an email, or you can even use what's called the electronic communities of interest tool. We will also have a downloadable paper version of our communities of interest tool. Whichever way it is, you too can use that to tell your story and tell us about other things that would help us to understand your community, whether it's data or, other different kinds of things that you feel like would be important for us to know. In addition to telling us either in writing or verbally about your communities, tell us about your community's issues. Sometimes people get involved in redistricting because they feel like their issues haven't been represented, and you want us to know about those issues that you feel like have been overlooked. Again, it could be through your stories, it could be through data, whichever way it is. Um, in addition, tell us by showing us a picture, draw us a map of your community. Mark the street names and the kind of the landmarks and other things that you feel like are important to helping us understand your community of interest. So there's three things that you could do then when you send us your community of interest. One, you could describe. Two, draw the map. And three, send the testimony directly to the commission. So you could either call, write, or submit through the communities of interest tool. And there are, let me just show you, this is some of the ways in which you could provide this public input that I've been talking about. So one, we do have what's called a communities of interest mapping tool. So that can be found at a website called drawmycacommunity.org. And then on the website for the commission, which is wedrawthelinesca.org, you can also download a paper form with prepaid postage on it. As I said, you could also email us your testimony to Voters First Act at crc.ca.gov, and you could include a picture of your map. If you choose to phone it in, you could just tell us a story about it, and then you could follow up with a written testimony of your map. Or you could draw the map, or you could use the electronic means to draw a map and mail it to us, to our office in Sacramento. Now, I also want to just note for you that we do have our communities of interest tool available actually in 14 different languages. And there are tutorials that are also available in those languages because we want to make sure that that this process is not only available to those who speak English, but also to anybody who feel more comfortable telling us about their community of interest in a language other than English. And so we are very cognizant that that language access is an important part of engaging people in this process. So we also have translated materials, the fact sheets, the flyers, frequently asked questions, even this presentation for anybody who might want to give this presentation in a language other than English. And I also want to say that we will provide interpretation for public comment at our business meetings, as well as to give testimony at our public input meetings, as long as we have 5 days advance notice. And then in writing, anybody can send written public input in any language, and what we'll do is we'll have it translated into English. Now, we know that COVID has delayed a lot of things, including the census. And so it does mean that we're looking at some significant delays. Fortunately, we were able to get the California State Supreme Court, who gave us an extension. I do want to just note that the dates are a little fluid right now. And in fact, if you're curious and interested, if you listen in on any of our meetings, particularly next week, one of the areas that we're grappling with is what is going to be the final date by which we will be submitting our maps to the Secretary of State. And right now there's kind of a debate depending on when we actually receive the census data. So you can see that there's a range, and right now one of the biggest concerns is that if we're looking at submitting final maps by the end of December, is that going to then take us into a period where we're going to be asking for final input on the final maps during the holiday times, or is it better that we delay the submission to after the holidays? But I just want to note that we do not work in a vacuum, and that any delay is going to also then impact the June primaries for the 2022 midterms. And so those are some of the kind of factors that we're taking into account. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for, for listening and having me, and being interested in this conversation about redistricting. I just want to remind you, I'm happy to take any questions. I just cannot take any public input. And if, as a result of this, if you have any other groups that would like this, presentation to be given, we're more than happy to. I'm more than happy. We, the commissioners, are more than happy to give these redistricting presentations to anybody else. So, thanks for your time. And Joanna, I'm going to go back to you. I hope that was
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you so much, Commissioner. That was really helpful and really interesting. Would you mind if we close this out so people can see faces when we're when people, we've got some questions already put in the chat.
All right, there we
Um,
go.
and so I think the first question is, we had a couple people talk about that the census, they believe the census numbers were perhaps skewed because the Trump administration, used some fear tactics, they believe, to it kind of curbed people who might have responded, especially undocumented individuals. Does that have any weight in your decisions, because undocumented residents may have avoided the census and may not be taken into account?
Um, you know, as far as I understand, I mean, the commission is going to use the census data as it was given to us. And so, while we know that there's likely undercounts in a number of cities and also amongst communities, um, we are going to use what was officially certified as the census numbers.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And kind of on that point, I just wanted to recognize someone mentioned that because of the timing of the census was off too, but you're taking the numbers as you have them, and you can't look into the numbers so whether it started late, ended early, whatever, that's your numbers are your numbers that you're working off of.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing though, just in case anybody is interested. So one of the things is, so right now, what we've been told and what the expectation is that the census is going to release what they call legacy data. So basically, this is the raw census numbers. It's going to be given to the states, all the states, around mid-August. Fortunately, California has what's called the statewide database, and so they'll be taking the numbers and processing the numbers so that it will become usable for the redistricting commission. One of the things, so that they estimate that that's going to take about 2 weeks to process it so that it can be usable by us. But one of the other things that they're going to be doing for us, that I think is interesting, is that um, we made the commission made a decision that we are going to take um, those that are incarcerated in California state prisons, and we're going to reallocate um, incarcerated people who are in what's essentially, I think they call it group quarters, and reallocate them to their last known address in the state of California, so that then for example, it won't skew the numbers of a region where, that particular, prison is located. So that's estimated to take about another 4 weeks. So when we actually get the final usable numbers, that will be around end of September, which is about a month earlier than what we were told we were originally going to have when we would originally have the numbers. So I thought I'd at least mention that there's maybe some good news in that as well too, because those who are incarcerated, even though they may be situated in one location, if they need to request help from an elected official, they need to request help from the representative, based on their last known location. So we felt that this is at least the fairest way to ensure fair representation for those who are incarcerated.
That's great. That's nice. Thank you for sharing that. I think that is one of our areas of interest, is how prisoner rights and things. Can you tell us? Sue Ellen asked, Why isn't it required to have an independent redrawing at the county and local levels? Does it have to be a ballot initiative? And how can we participate at those levels?
Yeah, so and that's a great question. Yeah, every county and city, jurisdiction is going to do things in their own way, and so, that is definitely one of the areas where there can be, I think, some, I would say, advocacy and activism that could take part in terms of, having an independent redistricting commission. I will note, San Diego, the city and county of San Diego instituted for the first time, they are having their first independent redistricting commission. The
Right.
city and county of Los Angeles has also instituted an independent redistricting commission. I believe the city of Long Beach has also instituted a independent redistricting commission. I wish I could say Orange County or the county of Orange had an independent redistricting commission, but we do not right now. But that is something that maybe that this is going to be a new wave, that as I think the people of California see the value of an independent redistricting commission, they will also advocate for similar commissions at their local county city levels. And also, as I said, redistricting is going to be taking place at multiple levels, not just city, county, water districts, community college districts are also going to be, taking part or having redistricting depending on how they're structured. And so, there's definitely lots of room for, I think, anyone who is interested in ensuring that um, fair representation occurs, also advocating for independent redistricting at other levels.
Do you know if in the Los Angeles and the San Diego redistricting, was that the county board of supervisors deciding to do that check and balance on itself and making itself an independent commission? Or do you know if there was a grassroots movement that applied pressure on them, or that it was maybe as those commissioners and as those board of supervisor members were being elected, that they were being held to a promise maybe that they made before they were elected? Do you have any idea on that?
Yeah, you know what? That's a great question. I don't know for sure, and I don't want to pretend that I know, but
Yeah.
I could find out. But regardless of how they were formed, I would just say that if that's something that we would like to see here in Orange County, I like to believe that the advocacy and the voice of a determined group of people can really at least incentivize you
Right.
know positive change, right?
I
So
love that. I love that. Right. Power to the people. Exactly. Another question, it might be the last one we have time for, but will each California Citizens Commissioner read and review input provided, or will each commissioner focus on their own region's input?
we're all going to look at every piece of input that we get.
Okay.
And we're right now, and if you're interested, we're also working through the details of not only we're we're collecting the inputs. We're also now working through how are we going to um, how are we going to create a system where we could, more effectively analyze all of the data that we get. And so those are also some of the conversations that we're having at a commission level right now, in terms of, I mean, what I was told is that the 2010 census received something like 20,000 pieces of input from Californians. And we expect, and in fact, I'm a very competitive person. I've started telling people, we got to beat that record. So, but that also means this is what we're going to be looking at too. And we're just trying to figure out ways in which we can, you know, um, efficiently and effectively, have the data collected and perhaps, yeah, yeah, grouped in such a way that we can actually also analyze it and really understand and look at all that data. So
Mm.
I'm looking forward to seeing how that's all going to happen. But that's one of the discussions that we're currently having right now.
Well, thank you so incredibly much for being with us. I don't know if you've been able to take a look at the comments in the chat, but everyone is giving you lots of accolades and telling you what a superb and informative presentation that was. So thank you so much for being here tonight.
Great.
And
Thank
we're going to
you.
transition. Feel free to stay on. If you need to jump off, we are recording this and we'll send it to the commission afterwards as they requested. But feel free to stay on. But if you need to leave, I understand. And have a wonderful night. And thank you again, Commissioner. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I do apologize. I need to go and walk my dog next. So,
Of course.
but thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
And now I'm excited to introduce my friend Karen Lawson. Karen is an activist primarily in the 39th district here in Orange County. And she is we met actually when she was, I think, one of the rebel rousers who founded Indivisible 39th. And then she led the 39th Action Council, was very instrumental in getting Gil Cisneros elected in 2018. And we won't hold her responsible at all for him not winning in 2020. And she also has been instrumental in trying to develop what we also are trying to develop kind of more in Central and South County, a blue bench project where they are trying to recruit and fund and train candidates at all levels of government who are Democrat progressive, so that they can win some of those down ballot seats and have some success in kind of taking over our kind of very red county. And she's one of the loveliest women you'll meet as well. So I'd like to introduce my friend Karen Lawson, who will teach us how, we were just told about what the commission does and how important it is. And now she's going to give us the tools to do the advocacy that the commissioner was referring to. Karen.
Thank you, Joanna. You're so kind. And thank you to Sue Ellen for passing this invitation to me. Is my audio good at this point?
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Thank you.
Okay. And I'd like to share a PDF document. Do you know if I've been made?
Yeah, I just made you a co-host, so
Okay.
you should be able to share screen.
Okay, great. Good. So I'm sharing a PDF right now that looks like a slide, and the title says 2020 Redistricting Public Input. Is that visible?
Yep, it's good.
Great. So just right off the top, I want to mention that we're in 2021, but we're still talking about 2020 redistricting, and that's the way it'll go throughout this whole process. So it catches my eye every time I look at it. I keep thinking it's a typo, but it's not. And I also just briefly want to mention that in Congressional District 39, a number of organizations came together as sort of a collaborative, unincorporated kind of grass tops organization. And we decided that, synergizing, communicating, trying to avoid overlapping our dates and so forth was going to help us all around, whether it was for advocating on social issues or our electoral work. And our Action Council continues to thrive 3 years later. We just actually had an Action Council meeting this past Monday. And I want to mention that my colleague, counterpart in crime, Patricia Hanzo, is on this call. Patricia, so keep me honest here. If you think of anything that I'm missing, be sure to jump in, okay?
Okay.
One of our strategic objectives for our Action Council in 2019 was to form that blue bench project that Joanna just talked about. And then also we wanted to make public input to the redistricting process a strategic priority for all the groups in our Action Council. And the reason why we're focusing on public input is frankly, the gamut of state redistricting can be very overwhelming. I will admit the first time I got onto the website, it was too much for me to really soak in. So breaking these things down into little bits is where we decided to go. And focusing on what Commissioner Akutagawa just talked about with communities of interest became our focal point. So how could we as an Action Council help the organizations that are part of our coalition get their arms around giving the public input? So The presentation that we all just saw is terrific. It gives a really good overview of the structure of the commission, the purpose, how important public input is. And for some of us, we still need to break it down into steps. And that's what this next 10 minutes is, just to give you an overview of a project that we took on with a group of, help me, Patricia, was it like 6 or 8 people on our work group, something like that?
Yes, like 6.
And yeah, so we came together and we decided we wanted to put a very simple playbook together that could be downloaded free as a Google document by anybody who wanted to just sit down with their fellow activists and start talking about what's the compelling public input that we should be giving for the issues that we care about. So we embarked on this project to create a playbook together. And I want to just briefly touch on this next slide, because I think Linda pretty much went over all this, but for state redistricting, we're focusing on Congress. We want fair representation. It's important to think about the types of funding and legislation that congressional representation can do for us in our communities. And then separately, to think in our minds, what is it that the legislature at the state level can do for us? And same thing with how our taxes are equalized. And by starting there, just thinking about fair representation, we then kind of move into, so what is it we want to do here? Well, between June and August of this year, we need to be prepared as individuals and in small groups and large groups as communities of interest to really think through, what are our issues? What do we want to advocate for? Whether it's, we're pro something or maybe we're opposing something. What is it that, how can we get involved, get our hands in it? The commissioner just talked about the census apportionment data versus redistricting data. Those are 2 separate files. And what was released on April 16th was the apportionment data. What will be coming, as Linda said, will be the redistricting data. And that's what the commission will be compelled to use, undercounts or not, for redistricting. It's very important that all of us approach our input with a very clear context around representation. We want fair representation. This is not about us trying to seek an electoral advantage. And that, we want local voices. I will tell you that the Orange County Civic Engagement Table Alliance currently has about a dozen of the large groups, mostly ethnic groups, that have been meeting, and they're coming together with their points of advocacy that they'll be giving to the commission. And it'll be important that communities of interest understand what the OCCET is advocating for, because there's power in numbers. And it may not be sexy, but when you get, 20,000, like Linda was saying, inputs, and you have a number that are echoing one another and amplifying specific points of advocacy, it will make a difference. And we want our input to be compelling. So for those of you that are interested in marketing, doing something that catches the attention of the commissioners will be important. Getting to know their personalities and kind of how to call out the things that we care about in a way where they will perk their ears up is going to be important. And then how to prepare. So the literal how to is what our Action Council wanted to get to. And in the how to, what we thought was really important was how to prepare input. What criteria should you think about? So Linda mentioned the criteria that's mandatory for the commission to follow. And then, what is it, scratch our heads, that we think is really key for the groups that we worship and play and work with, and how do we break it down to the things that are most important to us? We also thought that resources and links were really important. So our playbook is a Google document that anybody can download from the internet, and it's really I guess we tried to just be as basic as we could. So you'll see it's not a graphic design feat, but we tried to go in 4 pages through the most important things that you would want to know if you got a group of, half a dozen people together to start brainstorming what kind of input you want to give. We did go over the timeline, although as Linda mentioned, you want to check the timeline because the dates are changing. By the way, just a week before last, there was a calendar released with hearing dates that are coming up. And if we have time, well, maybe I'll just flash that up there for you. There is now a calendar. So for those of us that are interested in knowing when Orange County is going to have its first public input hearing, you want to look at that map that Linda showed. I'll show it again with which zone we're in. In Orange County, we're in zone, let's see, I have to remind myself. Los Angeles County is H, Inland Empire is I, we're zone J, and then San Diego is zone K. So in this, I hope you can see what I'm showing you. In this schedule, it says that on Thursday, July 8th, there will be a zone J, which is Orange County, community of input meeting. So the time is TBD and so is the location. Just want to put that out there. It's publicly available, this schedule, and it will be changing. But we just felt it was so important in our playbook that we call out the timeline because there are these two very specific, they're in bold here, windows of opportunity. And Linda, is this like super small? Can you see it?
We can see it.
Okay. So when you see the playbook, you'll see the timeline. And then here you go. This is really the crux of what we wanted to do. What are the steps to get ready to give public input? View the redistricting basics presentation, which you just did, everybody on this call. Form your study group, and then go to the tool that's called Draw My Community, and we link to that so you can go see it. It walks you through some questions to help you start thinking about what your advocacy might look like. You might want to include some local officials where you would interview them to help you really focus in on fair representation. While electeds cannot participate in public input, they can certainly give great input to your community of interest as you formulate your points of advocacy. And then you want to decide how you're going to give your input, whether you're going to go to one of those public hearings, have somebody speak, maybe you put it in writing, maybe you email it. So the playbook walks you through the different ways you could do that. And then this is really I think one of the most valuable parts of the playbook is Linda went through the commission mandatory criteria, and then she went through verbally a bunch of other pieces. When you sit down with the playbook with your small group to start focusing on your points of advocacy, this will really help you stimulate some of your conversation about fair representation and the things that you want to make sure you get across to the commissioners. So look at the criteria. And then the last page on our playbook is just these resources and links. So it'll help you again as a group to take a look at, there's like this graphic that talks about the most important things to consider on your input. We give some links to current boundaries so that you can reorient or refresh yourself about, what does my assembly district boundary look like? What other links here? The commissioners page, the calendar, the presentation you just saw, if you want to pull down a copy of that. A link to the mapping tool called Draw My Community that'll help you see streets and city boundaries, and it walks you through some questions to help you really pin down what you want to advocate for. And then there's a notes section for the group to work with. So that gives you an overview of what our District Action Council designed and has made available. And I'm going to go into the chat right now and put the link to the playbook. So if you want to link to it, you can bookmark it on your computer or wherever you are, or we can ask that Wave send out this link in a future communication to the membership. Or both.
We'd be happy to. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome. So this map probably looks very familiar because it's the one Linda just showed us. The hearing dates are located at this link. And this presentation will also be available to share with the membership. And finally, just to kind of finish up here before we take any questions, we are, as a Action Council, actively posting social media posts, graphics, and links, encouraging our community to get involved and to use our playbook. We collectively, as a small but mighty work group, sent out, I think, Patricia, was it about 50 groups that we reached out to, 50?
Yeah, we have a long list.
And we're starting to see some of them now coming back to us saying, okay, we're ready. What do we do now? So hopefully you'll do the same. Let's see. And that brings us to the end of what I prepared for this evening. I'm happy to take any questions. And again, Patricia, help me out here.
Thank you so much, Karen. We again, wonderful. I don't know if you see the chat, but a lot of people, thank you for your time here. Someone wanted to ask or wanted some information on, can you give us an example of a specific group's area of interest?
Right. So one that's exciting to me, because WAVE got us started in the north part of the district with college student civic engagement. Joanna, you got us all started with that, and Suda. I'm not saying.
Yeah, that's right, Suad.
Anyway, so one of the groups that's forming up here, who has our playbook, is there's a student association at Cal State Fullerton, and they're going to be sitting down to do a community of interest study group. So they'll be thinking about, what are the things that affect us as students here at Cal State Fullerton? It's a commuter school, but they also have other issues that impact their daily lives. And I'm curious to see what they come up with as their points of advocacy.
Right. And my understanding is a group, sorry, I need to plug in my computer before the whole meeting ended because my computer would die. That a community group can be it could be a hiking club. It
Yes.
could be, it can be there. You really, if you think about, maybe it's a church
Faith or a faith group. Yep.
A faith group. Exactly.
Absolutely.
People that kind of,
right. Groups that are like volunteers at the Boys and Girls Club or another local nonprofit can sit down together. We have city collaboratives up here in the north part of the county.
Yeah,
I don't know.
The lawn bowling association, if there's a lawn bowling area, or a pickleball club could be
Yeah.
an area, a group of interest. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of these. So it's, you kind of have to think outside the box, because I think people don't reflect on what communities they belong in, or they think, oh, I don't belong to any communities. But if they start to think about it, maybe they're in a mom's prayer group, maybe they're in a school district. You might want to, that might be a consideration.
Yeah.
They be in some social clubs. There might be, So,
and the fear, of course, is that the larger groups will give their input no matter what. But the smaller voices from on the ground in the communities where we live kind of get stymied. It's like, have you heard that term, analysis paralysis? Like, you just don't do anything because you don't know where to start.
Right. Right.
So by having a conversation with even 2 or 3 other people, it becomes like popcorn. And then you just extract from that, okay, those are going to be the 2 that we're really going to work on. Now let's do our research. And what is it we're going to say to the commission that we want or we don't want?
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to be compelling? And are we going to do it by email, or are we going to do it at the public hearing? The hardest part is getting started.
Right. And one area I think that this is so important right now is, I think we've all read in the paper recently that Katie Porter's district is about 5,000 people too large. And so what portion of that district is going to move? And that's all up for grabs. And so, it does depend on, part of it is the 48th, does the 48th need to get bigger? Does the 49th need to get bigger? What are the contiguous areas? But then it is, if it's a bigger border, and that any part of that, maybe 1 or 2 cities could go over, how do you carve that out and get those 5,000 people? Do you take 2,500 from the top and 25 from the bottom? So
that's the job of the commission, right? That's the job of the commission. But some people are starting with their premise in mind. So they would, in that scenario, say, okay, we know we're going to lose 5,000 people from our district. we don't want to lose them from this area because they're people that are all connected for a certain reason.
Right.
So what we want to do is give public input that really defends us staying together, and
Right.
it leaves the other areas that don't have that same connected issue up
Mhm.
for grabs. You know, you could kind of start that way and back into it, you know,
Yeah.
if you have that issue, or you could actually start with the issues and build out from there. But ultimately, the commission has the final scissors.
Right.
And by the way, anybody that's been following, I don't know, on the commission meets for these like 8-hour long meetings, 3 days in a row, and they're all streamed on the video on the internet. And one of the things that they've been working on over the the past several months is selecting a map drawer. So the people who actually do the drawing of the maps are not the commissioners. The commissioners give the input to the GPS contracted vendor. The vendor produces the actual maps, and then the commissioners scrub them and make sure that it, you know, it protects all the criteria, that it's correct, and then bounces it back to the map drawer to fix it. So they don't physically actually do the mapping.
Right. That is interesting because I think most of us, think that they're sitting there with little
it's
screens,
it's
moving.
software, yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
if you get a community of interest, you know, public input testimony, you know, in July that says, you know, we are all connected in this part of South County for the following reasons, and
Right.
it's absolutely critical to us that we not be divided.
Yeah.
Then the commissioners go back to the software, you know, guru and say, okay, fix it, take this out, put that in. And
Right.
then,
Right.
okay, now
Exactly.
what does that look like? You know,
It's a process.
they've got a big job.
They do. They do. Well, Karen, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. That was incredibly informative, and we've already had some. I think people would like to either see this again. So I don't know if that's something that I can either put them in touch with you if they want to see it, or if we can send it out to some of the people who were here tonight. But you and I can talk about that offline. But we'll definitely send the link there. But thank you for sharing that. Mira had one question that had about census apportionment data not being the same as redistricting data, and that is true. So the apportionment data is about how many people belong in each district, and then
That's
the
right.
redistricting is to draw those lines to keep the correct amount of people within that district, but keep them connected, that they're in these community groups, and that the community groups stay together. So yes, so you're right, Mira. But thank you all. I'm gonna end the meeting now, unless anybody has any further questions. But it was great to see all of you and to spend some time with you tonight. And I hope we're all fired up and we've got our marching orders and how we can make sure that our communities are heard and kept together. And the impact, especially, one thing we haven't really talked about is the way that this pans out for kind of the marginalized communities. And I think that's one place where WAVE can come in some of our work with our migrant rights and our government integrity, and that there's a crossover there, even with the voter mobilization, that we can be making sure that some of these more marginalized communities that aren't speaking up for themselves and maybe don't have the same access to resources that we have about learning about this and having a commissioner on, that we can empower them to speak up and define their community groups as well. So if you have church friends that might be interested in this, or if there are other outreach ways, I know we work with Unidos and Projects Unidos and a few different, many different groups that I know will be reaching out to them to try to help empower them to be advocates for themselves about their census redistricting. But if
And
you
Joanna, this is Karen. I just want to remind you that this is a perfect way that you can synergize with the OCCET, because their alliance partners are going to be making those same points of advocacy.
And
so
what's the OCCET actually? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so Orange County Civic Engagement Table, you
right,
can
yes.
go on the internet and you'll see their page with all of their alliance members, but their partners are going to making the same kind of points that you're talking about, or at least, to the same types of issues. And again, amplifying the same advocacy points will go a long way. Right.
And WAVE actually does sit. I know Cricket Jimmy sits on a few of these as a head of migrant rights, sits on a few different advocacy tables. And I know Judith on our social justice sits on another one or two. So we are on these we're at these tables and trying to help connect those groups with the commission information. So thank you all for being with us here tonight. I think I'm going to end the meeting now, and it's so great to see you all, and you have a great weekend.